Hello and welcome to Antidote with Rain Lawrence. I'm here today with Caroline Spear of the Placenta Cabin. She's a birth doula, placenta remedies specialist, homeopath, gut and psychology practitioner, and nutritionist. I hope I've got that right. You do a lot, Caroline. Welcome. Hello. How are you?
Hello, fine. I'm really good, thank you. It's really exciting to be here and then to be talking with you.
Good, lovely to have you. So I love on your website, I had a little investigation into you, obviously in light of this conversation, and you say on there that you're here, I'm here for you if you've exhausted all conventional medicine has to offer. Can you tell us about some of the successes that you've had with your clients where, you know, all the other avenues had failed and they'd managed to get some relief with your techniques or with different alternative methods?
Yes, one of them actually was with a family who have an autistic child who was struggling so much with school, running away, head banging, just generally ripping things about and pulling things apart, and not being able to get through to this child. And Mum came to me for homeopathic treatment, but we looked at both what they were eating and treated homeopathically. And 6 weeks later, she said, "Caroline, we've actually been able to breathe. The siblings have all had downtime," and we've gone, we've had outbreaks, we've had fits of annoyance, but nothing like we've had before. And this child is autistic and will always be autistic. But what I see happening with both that combination of homeopathy and nutrition is that you take away the severity and the extremes of the symptom.
Make it more manageable.
Oh God, and it helps the whole family. And then there was another child who had unexplained aches and pains and would be in pain for days on end, and painkillers weren't reaching it. The doctors didn't have a clue. And it really was a dietary thing. We changed the diet, we took the gluten out, we got some good animal fats, some good animal proteins back into the diet. We even reduced the vegetables, and the pains went.
Bet the kid was happy.
The leg pains went. Yeah. And that child then grew up to be able to go and buy their own food, but they now know, and they, you know, and then they go off and they buy the McDonald's. They're making a decision that they're going to do this, but the consequences are nowhere near as severe as when they were little, because they've done lots of gut healing. And gosh, and another one, a lady in her 70s. Sorry, just to quickly say this.
Successes. Yes, please.
There's always more to be had, aren't there? But one lady in her 70s couldn't go out in the sun, so has spent the last 20 years avoiding the sun, and she had some rheumatic issues and some digestive issues. So again, we changed her way of eating, and she had a daughter who was on board, so the daughter helped her to get started. And that's one of the things I do. I'll go into people's homes, I'll help them to get started. And I didn't see this lady for about 4 months, and we were into August, and when I did, she had a suntan. She just went, "I just love it." She said, "I go outside now, I don't burn, my eyes don't hurt, and I feel really good," because she was getting natural D3 light. And it's when, and the other thing, also had one patient who was severely diabetic, type 1, uncontrolled, and we got her onto a very low carbohydrate way of eating. She lost 2 stone in weight. Her husband joined her to support her. He lost a load of weight, and she regained the peripheral vision of her eyesight. And she couldn't believe it. She said, "I've had to learn to see all over again." And her blood sugars came down to a consistent. There was more I would have liked to have done, as you always do, but her blood sugar levels came down to a much safer and a consistent level. And she was on an insulin pump and driven with injections. But of course, you have to work more closely, because they have to reduce their insulin will naturally drop their requirements. So there's a lot more work doing alongside. But for somebody to regain peripheral vision, that's just amazing.
Yeah,
and I did once help a goat to become. I did once help a farmer with their goats. I suggested, because I'm not allowed to treat homeopathically, so I suggested Kali carb. And when I went back the next year, that goat had kids. Ta-da!
Hey, more goats. We need more goats in this world.
We do. They make great milk. So
I love it. I live in Jamaica and there's always goats just wandering. Sometimes you'll have to stop your car because there's like, 20 goats need to cross
Oh,
the
I
road. It's
love
wonderful. Love it.
it. It is wonderful, isn't it? And they taste really good. Oops.
So nice. They do taste wonderful. Yeah, sorry, vegans. That's great. Like, so it sounds very much, when you spoke about how you actually go into people's homes, look in their cupboards, really get to know them, bring the family in. So it's a really holistic approach, is it?
It is, because when I first changed, because I used to be vegetarian, I've been vegan, so I do understand. But again, improving one's health and knowing how difficult it was for me, because I thought I was a good cook and knew how to cook. And so when I was having to change what I was doing, I had a friend who worked alongside me, and that just really opened up my eyes to the importance of, you walk the journey with somebody until they can go off on their own. And that support, because sometimes you feel daft. Even I don't know how to cook a piece of beef. I don't know how to make bone stock. God, it stinks. Is this normal? So it's help, and also helping to rethink how you look at food and what you can eat, and stepping away from the standard bag of crisps, bottle of pop, and a pizza.
Yeah, it gets boring, doesn't it? And I think people get stuck in a rut of just, they've got these 5 or probably less sometimes dishes that they know how to cook, and they know where to get the ingredients. So they just, get into that that cycle.
And when it's foodstuffs that work for you, then it's okay. You don't need to have a massive this idea of having eat the rainbow, etc., etc. It's really not. It's not necessary. What's necessary is that you eat the foods that work for you, and keep you healthy and well.
Okay, and how would you do? Is it quite medical, the way that you find out what works for you? Is it a blood test or is it allergy testing? How do you discover what each person needs?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, one of the things that I need to do is I need to do a phlebotomy course so I can take blood. I have a friend who will do that. So you can do laboratory testing, but often it's you go through, what are people eating? What are their signs and their symptoms? And certain foods and what's in food can cause, we all know about gluten and the blood-brain barrier, and inability to digest it and the gut issues it causes. But it can cause schizophrenia, it can cause depression, it can cause huge mood swings. And so often it's about, if you can, taking people back to a really basic, simple diet, which is basically meat and veg, eggs, if you can tolerate dairy, unprocessed, full-fat dairy. It's going back to, what did we evolve as humans? What were we eating? And I was privileged over 30 years ago. I went to Kenya and spent a little bit of time with tribal peoples like the Maasai. And when you look at
they
the
love
work
their goat's milk, don't they?
And and they look after excellent, and they look after their land. They understand. My God, they understand so much that we've forgotten, but about cycles and how to look after the animals. But when you see their bone structures, perfect. They don't need glasses. They've got beautiful big cheekbones. They've got wide mouths. They've got good eyesight, and they're strong. I mean, the women, for God's sake, the women are twice as strong as a white Western man. Straight off.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. It's like, run a mile, don't upset.
So cool.
But what you see is, and they don't have the same diseases. They so rarely have the cancers and the arthritic diseases, the disease of degeneration. Yeah, the respiratory, because if you're living in a hut that you don't have ventilation for your fire, even I sitting around an outside bonfire, I get quite bunged up and ick for the next day, but that's a choice. But there's ventilation. So, and you see that in lots of groups where people are still eating their indigenous foods, their health is good. So whereas when you start eating, and we always say the more westernized style of diet and lots of refined foods, processed foods, they're not foods, they're a source of energy, but they don't rebuild blood cells, they don't rebuild tissue, they damage the gut. And you see in the way that the children are formed at birth, it's and I'm one of those people that ate the way that didn't give my children optimal physique. And I would like to help people to reverse that. I would really like people to be being really healthy themselves, so that they can create the most robust, healthy babies, so that the next generation. And that's not putting blame on people.
No, of course not. You mentioned about the generational thing and how, in modern society, we're eating in a way that our physical systems aren't designed for. Do you
Yeah.
think that's got worse in the last 10 years? Do you see any way to turn it around?
It's been going on for generations, because I'm very close. I'm 58 now, and I can remember when I was growing up, even then, boys were taught to cook from tin cans in school. Girls took in fresh ingredients. I know, shocker, isn't it?
God.
But a lot of people, they went to the local chippy. They went to their local takeaway, and we get it even now, just to make some really basic vegetable sauces. And in one of the shops where I help out occasionally, where we get foods that supermarkets, which they sell by date, and a lot of people, they don't know what to do with fresh food, and trying to, I love to teach, and it's just, this is a simplicity, and when you don't have a lot of money and you haven't got more than one pot and pan, and I'm a great charity shop person, I'm a real,
I love a charity shop.
Oh, why wouldn't you? Just why wouldn't you? So
you can get like the most unique stuff, like nobody's going to have it because it's not in H&M. So
yeah, those are my wardrobe is, and I'm learning to resew again so I can patch and.
Wow.
I'm not great, but it's good fun. But it's back to that. You need a decent knife. You do need, or you need a decent knife sharpener, a chopping board. It can be wood, plastic, glass, preferably wood. A couple of saucepans, and you're away. You don't need big fancy cookers and utensils. You just need a couple of good, decent. Well, to me, it's always a good knife, so you can chop and par. And use your eyes, use your nose. So it's, yes. Send your kids to school.
I've liked that about. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, send your kids to school if they're hungry, on an egg or a couple of eggs with butter. They're getting protein, good fats. They're getting nutrients that help them grow, and that will see them nicely through the morning.
Yeah, I think we've probably bought too quickly and heavily into the convenience thing, and like everything has to be quick and throw it in the microwave, and actually, it doesn't take long to boil an egg or to
scramble one.
What's the other one? Oh, I've just forgotten what the eggs are. Not fry, but scramble, or what's the one that I like? It's like the sort of posh one. What are they called?
Oh, when you boil them in water. So it's I know what you mean.
You have to sort of I put a little bit of cider vinegar in, because apparently it stops it from I can't remember what it's called now. And I've liked that about Jamaica actually, that it's very, everybody's got a little avocado tree or a little banana tree or a little papaya tree in their garden. So it's very much that instantaneous thing of just picking it and eating it. Like, we're so far removed now in the West from, a can of beans in a tin. Where did that come from? Where was it made? What's in it?
What's in it? Yeah.
What's in it? This is the big question.
And I'm not sure everything's always listed, so it's difficult. It's not it's difficult because people aren't brought up to trust their ability to put fresh foods together, and I think one of the biggest problems is it's always, there's not enough food to feed the whole wide world. We produce more than enough food to feed the whole wide world. There aren't enough people with enough money to buy the food that's produced.
And then you've got people like Bill Gates, who's sort of monopolizing land all over the place, and he tries to say that it's for the good of the world, but I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, I'm afraid. But that's too political. We're just talking health today. We're not getting into that quagmire. Just going back to when you sorry, go on.
No, but the trouble is that health, birth, the things that you and I love and have passions for, they are political, because people who are in good health don't need drugs. People who don't need drugs aren't propping up a pharmaceutical industry.
Exactly. They need us to stay ill and reliant on the system. Just going back to you were talking about the autistic child that you treated, and the link between gut health, diet, and autism. Is that well documented? Why aren't people more aware of that research and using these techniques more?
God,
It
that's
seems
such
to
a
just
good
be
question.
stick them on Adderall or stick them on some sort of pharmacological
I
thing for the
don't
rest of their
think
life, isn't it?
I don't think that there is one set cause for autism. I think there's a whole load of environmental pollutions going on, and you know, things that we use in our home, the mum's gut health, the state of the dad's sperm, you know, that plays a big part. So, and our gut health is still. I'm a GAPS practitioner, gut and psychology, gut and physiology, and Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride came into that because her son was autistic, or is autistic. Sorry, I must get this correct. And what she found with a lot of the patients that she began to see was gut health, the state of the mother when the child was born. So we already know if a child is born at home, they have the healthiest gut bacteria. Then if you're born in hospital, and then if you're born by cesarean section. But then babies are either given a vitamin K solution or they're jabbed with vitamin K very quickly after birth. We don't know what that's actually doing to the gut, and I would love there to be research. But we do know that when our gut health isn't good, because the vagus nerve forms when we're inside our mums and we're developing, and it runs between the brain and the gut. So it's constantly sending messages. Which came first, the gut or the brain? I don't know. But when the gut's unhappy, the brain isn't happy. And so when you get your gut soothed and settled, and we put a lot of stuff into our bodies that damage the gut, that cause it to be leaky. So substances that shouldn't go to the bloodstream can get into our bloodstream, travel wherever, and lodge. And because we're all individuals, that's why you don't get consistently the same picture with lots of people, because we are individual. And so I do feel really passionate with birth again, wherever possible. A physiological.
Yeah, it's interesting about that microbiome. And
we said that we're 90% bacteria, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, gross. It's gross to think about, but yeah,
Okay,
it makes sense.
moving on swiftly.
It's fine, I can handle it. I'm just curious about the impact of any hospital visit in the neonatal period, because my sons were born at home, but after 5 hours they went into the hospital, and I believe, I'm still not even sure because the doctor's records are so poor, whether I was able to prevent them getting vitamin K or not. I suspect I put them off and delayed it, but I suspect they were still given vitamin K. And it's just so it's like bullying tactics, isn't it? Like, why can't I decline? I've done research, I'm an adult, I know that it's very rare blood disorder that it prevents. I know what the symptoms of that blood disorder is, so should my son exhibit them, then he could have the vitamin K. But they try to just steamroll you over until it's done. It's really annoying.
Yeah, I've seen some really hideous bullying in hospitals, and you just think, give us the evidence. Is it 1 in 10,000 babies may die of hemorrhagic brain disease? But what put them into that position in the first place to suddenly get hemorrhagic brain disease? Why? What wasn't functioning properly in their body? What happened prior to that caused them to have, in homeopathy we say, a susceptibility. So some people are susceptible to dust mites, some are susceptible to car fumes, you know, some are susceptible to damp weather and will always come down chesty, whereas other people will just fly through it. So we call that susceptibility. And I wonder so much what's happening to cause our children to be susceptible, even at such an early stage. And I think, it's intergenerational. If you think you and I began our lives in our grandmother's
I know, that's always blown my mind.
I
heard that, I'm like, what? It blows my mind.
It is mind-blowing, isn't it? But we're going back a couple of generations, so the health of our grandmother and grandfather actually contributed, impacts us now.
Yeah, that's mad. And also the levels of vitamin K in that injection are I think it's like multiple times more than the level of an adult human. So why on earth would a baby need that much?
It's 1,000 times, and I don't know.
1,000 times more. That just reeks to me of non-evidence-based practice, just doing things because we decided to do them years ago, and so we don't want to stop. And also propping up the pharmaceutical industry, big pharma, because if every child born in the UK and in the US and wherever else this practice is going on gets that, they must be raking it in.
Yep. And why aren't they ensuring that the mother's got plenty of K2 and it's K2? And why aren't they ensuring that her levels are good, so that when she's breastfeeding, or if she's formula feeding, then we know that in formula there'll be K2 or vitamin K. Anyway, there are 7 different forms of vitamin K. So, and also, of course, when they're born vaginally and they get to crawl over mum, they get, again, the bacteria from coming through her vagina and from her anus, trying not to to be very crude. I'll sod it. Vagina and poo, you need these things when you're born. And some women will try and capture those juices by using a swab in their vagina. So if they have to have a cesarean, they'll then rub it over the baby's nose and mouth. Hospitals aren't proactive in that, but the mums.
No, I've heard midwives actively deriding it, like, oh, it's gross. But humans are gross. I'm sorry, we poo, we piss, we bleed.
Absolutely,
we have
bleed.
babies covered in vernix.
Yeah.
Talking about derision, I'm sure you've had as a homeopath, I'm sure you've had your fair share of derision. I've heard it being like insulted for being like hippy dippy or woo woo. Can you tell us a bit about its origins and like the basic principles, with the aim of destigmatizing it a bit?
Yeah, I would love to. I grew up knowing that there was this thing called homeopathy, but it was something that other people did, other people. And I had a friend who was quite hippy dippy, and she took little white pills as a teenager. And then so when we came down to Sussex, and I had PTSD and a baby that threw up every night, and a friend said, I've got a friend at the bottom of the garden. She's the fairy at the bottom of the garden. Go and see Phil. So we went to see Phil, and my daughter stopped vomiting immediately. And I had an incredible journey through PTSD, being treated homeopathically, and I've never had asthma since. So, and of course I use it in childbirth, etc. So back in, I think it was around, 250 odd years ago, a man called Samuel Hahnemann in Germany. He was the son of a priest, and he could translate, interpret. He was a priest himself. He was a physician, and he could see that lots of his patients weren't getting better with doctor's medicine of that time. And through the work that he did in translations, he had this idea of what could kill you could make you better, which came to be known as what makes you ill makes you better. And he started off with cinchona, Peruvian bark, which produced symptoms like the malaria that people were getting in the area that he lived in. So lots of lowland, lots of water, lots of mosquitoes. And it took him time to succuss and to dilute. And each time he was always practicing and experimenting and getting better and better results. And he moved on to, and then I think arsenic was another substance that he also, we call it proving when you test, when you turn something into a homeopathic version. And of course,
it's like Bake Off.
It is a bit like Bake Off. Yeah, which one can I succuss? Which one can I dilute more? But the succussion is important, that banging. So different substances, and it just improved, and people weren't being harmed. People were getting better without, I hate using the word side effects. They weren't getting the bad effects of the medicines that he was developing. And homeopathy is still developing and evolving. And I think most people have heard of
good.
It is. It's also, I mean, it's been shown to work as, it's called an energetic medicine. And if you think about how are people watching us now, how can they hear us? We're thousands of miles apart, and goodness knows where the people are who are listening to us now and watching us. How? You put a radio on. How do you get that sound?
So it's all well and good saying, oh, that's woo-woo, but so is this. Like, how are we able to do this? It's something to do with energy and vibrations and
and I was like, sound waves. When you look at sound waves and how original TVs works, well, even how TVs work now, it's still a wave, or a wave of energy. And so that to me is how homeopathy
and there's
works.
this idea that if you can't see it or hear it, then it can't exist. But we know that is not true, because electricity and sound waves and
Yeah. And when you think about the older you get and you lose part of your hearing range, but those sounds are still there, even though you can no longer hear them. And most people have heard of arnica, and that used to bring a lot of dads into homeopathy. These older unfit men would all get together once they became dads and start playing games and football and big injuries, and you'd give them some arnica and it would stop hurting and the bruising would go down. And then maybe they would need some Roostox later or some Ruta because they strained a tendon. But obviously coughs, colds. I regained a lot of power as a woman by learning about homeopathy. So when my kids were ill, with the first two, I went to the doctors. In those days, you could get Calpol on prescription. Honestly, I'm not joking. Like, you come back with huge brown bottles of sticky red liquid. Those kids, sorry. And
I'm sure they forgive you.
I hope so. So now you but then when you learn how to use homeopathic remedies for coughs, colds, earaches, we've had, if somebody's bones are broken and they're not healing well, treat them homeopathically. I mean, treat them homeopathically anyway. Once the bone is set in a straight line, then you can give them homeopathic remedies to help that bone grow properly. And it's fantastic. Depression, it works on the emotionals, because often if you don't get the emotionals sorted out, you ain't gonna get the physicals, because whatever's going on here, your body is can manifest physically.
Absolutely. So, what would you say are your like top tips? Because I know there's a lot, you do a lot, you've got a lot of strings to your bow, and there is this, culturally there seems to be a lot more vegan people and vegetarians and also people who are starting to take charge of their own health and not just rely on the doctor. So what would you say, maybe 3 top tips that you could give everybody, or is it too individual to have anything that's sort of blanket for everyone?
First and foremost for health is to eat fresh foods. Learn how to make your meals using fresh, non-processed foods. If you're constantly putting the wrong mixture into cement, you can't build a strong wall. You'll build a wall, but over time it will crumble. So it's go back to basics. And you can't say what your grandparents ate anymore. You want to go back to what people were eating probably 100 years ago in developed societies. Try not to use them.
Sorry, I'm just wondering if I even know what fresh foods are, because I'm such a millennial. So I'm thinking, obviously I know that an apple from a tree is unlikely to be processed or to contain much more than just an apple. But what about things like rice and pasta? Are they very processed? Or I've heard people say that rice is not food, and sometimes when I cook rice and then I look at what it does once it's cooked and you leave it and it sort of congeals, and I wonder, I'm like, maybe they're right. It doesn't look very nutritional.
There isn't much nutrition in rice or in pasta. And if you think about pasta, is ground flour, and you can never, any grain or bean that's got a deep groove in it will be full of insect shit and little bits of insects, because you look at the tiny size of these things, you can never completely clean them out. So if you're eating chocolates, which is great for the mind, providing it's plain chocolate, you are still eating little bits of insects, because you can't clean the grain out. You can't actually, and who's going to get into each tiny teeny grain and clean it out and polish it prior to cooking? Carbohydrates are very nice, and if you're eating unprocessed carbohydrates, some people will do well on them. There are tribes of people around the world that still do, but the body's primary needs are fats and proteins.
Fats and proteins, okay.
But healthy fats.
Would you reckon? Do you think anybody can do really well on a vegan diet? Can you get enough protein and fat from a vegan diet, would you say? I think I know the answer from your facial expression.
The truth is that there are no indigenous peoples in this world who are naturally vegetarian. You have
Okay.
parts of countries that are vegetarian because of religious beliefs, but they're still eating eggs and they're still eating dairy.
Mm.
And to be honest, this criticism goes across all forms, just about all forms of eating. Is that if you're not eating fresh unprocessed foods, you're already eating stuff that's damaged, that's harmed. You don't know how many herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. Is there any nutrient value left in what you're having? If you look at fruit juices, the majority of fruit juices can be at least a year old before they're finally shipped out to shops.
Oh my gosh, really?
They
That
deoxygenate.
long?
Yeah, because they take the oxygen out and it gets put back in before they're put into their final tubs or UHT
Oh my gosh.
packs. So if
Yeah,
you're
that's
going to have
horrifying.
fruit juice, it is. I mean, if you're going to have fruit juice, buy fresh fruit and juice it yourself, because then you're still getting bits and pith and more of the whole fruits than just. If you think about it, humans didn't evolve drinking 5 juiced apples a day.
No.
We evolved hunting and eating the whole animal, including the bone marrow. So my second top tip is remove vegetable oils, processed grain and seed oils from your diet.
All of those, all of the above. Okay.
If you're,
I had it
if you're okay with,
some of them were better.
if you're okay with coconut oil, I say extra virgin unrefined olive oil. I used to drink gallons of the stuff and I was skinny, but I now know why. It really made me ill. My guts didn't like it. Very high in salicylates.
This is coconut oil. Or
no, actually,
virgin.
this is olive oil. Some people will react to coconut oil as well, but you don't know until you either take it out your diet and put it back in. But certainly all the commercial oils and seed oils are so delicate. They get damaged very easily. And then those oils sit in the membranes of our cells, but they're damaged. So you don't have a healthy membrane. You've got a membrane that's composed of damaged oils, because the body loves fats. Our hormones love fats. The brain is what, 66% fat?
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And our mitochondria thrive on saturated fats. Oh, and by the way, lettuce contains saturated fats. It's a massive subject. There aren't just 3 types of fats. There are so many different types of fats.
Outrageous.
Oh, I know. Lettuce has saturated fat. It's true.
Oh my God. Okay.
The saturated fat's good for you. So
I'm not sure I want to hear your third tip. I'm like, now I don't know what to eat. I mean, I think I have a pretty terrible diet, but I think it's probably no worse than any other Westerner, because we all tend to go to Tesco's or Sainsbury's and buy what's on the shelves.
Whereas we could be going to the butchery department, we could be going to the dairy department, we could be going to the grocer's department, and buying our fresh foods from there. And that's why we say come back to eating fresh unprocessed foods. Drink water. I think across all of this, I think we are so privileged. I'm going to use that. I hate that word privileged, but that we can choose how we eat. So many people throughout the world can't. And we can choose to be carnivore, vegetarian, vegan, thisism, thatism. And
yeah, we are. That is a real something valuable that we probably take for granted. Yeah.
And really all our body wants is good old basic meat, fish, eggs, dairy, some plant life, maybe, and fresh water. I
think that's probably the only bit I do consistently is drink enough water. Well, so I'll take that as a win. I'm lost as to how because I keep interrupting you. Did we get to number 3? So eat fresh foods that we would have eaten 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Remove all vegetable oils from your diet.
Yeah.
And what about number 3?
I'm back to that. Drink fresh water.
Oh, and drink fresh water.
Yeah. I think so. And then there's the obvious
Awesome.
things like,
So similar to homeopathy.
mm-hmm.
No, go on.
Wow.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just, it's things like walk. Don't spend all your life in front of the screen. Laugh. Laughter's fantastic. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Have you ever tried that laughing yoga, or just you
No.
just kind of start laughing? I had a book that had some exercises in it once, and it said just try to laugh for 7 minutes. So I set a timer, and at first you are clearly faking it, but it takes about, well, it took me about, I'm probably just a bit strange, but it took me about 20 seconds before the laughter was genuine, because it felt so silly. And I think it's just an instinct, isn't it? If you're laughing but it's fake, your body doesn't know that. Your body just feels whatever it usually feels when you're laughing, and then it takes over. So yeah, I think you're right. Laughter's great medicine. And similar to the homeopathy, there's sometimes a view that nutritionists, anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, and it doesn't take much training. What would you counter that argument, and what's the difference? I often see dietitian, nutritionist, and there's another one that sounds very similar to, I think, maybe nutritionalist and a nutritionist.
Oh,
is
right,
there
okay.
and what is it?
I think
so.
There are differences, and it's true. We can, I'm a qualified homeopath. I did my 4 years training and have my license to practice, or I sent it to practice, and I do my CPD. Nutrition is a fascinating one. Obviously I'm a certified GAPS practitioner. I've studied nutrition. My parents wouldn't let me become a vegetarian when I was 13 until I could prove to them. So I had to do some research, and that wasn't really me. But I did my research. And when I speak, a dietitian, to my way of thinking, they've been trained within the hospital system, and so they're very much geared towards the hospital, what's the pharmaceutical industry, and that way of looking at nutrition goes. Okay. And there's, as a nutritionist, there's so many different forms of nutrition. We've gone vegan, vegetarian, omnivore, carnivore. You can do the banana diet one day and the cabbage soup diet the next. I don't particularly recommend that, but might be useful for a couple of days fasting. But with the nutrition, there are lots of different ways of approaching nutrition. And one of the great embarrassments is that nutritional research actually is piss poor. Most of it's not worth the paper it's written on, because it's based upon people's memories. What were you eating a year ago? What did you eat last week? And I challenge everyone to keep a full food and drink diary for a week. Even when I wanted to, I lied. I was a bit embarrassed about some of the stuff I was troughing and the quantities. So even when I wanted to, didn't keep a full and honest diary. So that's the first thing. The other thing is also when you get, and this happens throughout all walks of life, who's paying for the research? Who's sponsoring it? So you need to read the title, and then the conclusions will respond to the title. But if you read the full bulk of the work, and within nutrition, trying to pick apart the healthy, all this nonsense about red meat causes cancer. What else are those people eating? Are they smoking? Are they drinking? Are they living in rooms full of mold? How old are they?
It's impossible to pin it down to one thing, isn't it?
There are too many variables.
How about this? I looked into this a few years ago, the Eat Right for Your Blood Type. What do you think of that? Because I got the little book, and I'm an O positive. So for me, my ancestors allegedly were those who, like you say, would just run, catch, kill. They were hunting animals and eating raw flesh. So that gave me justification not to continue with vegetarianism or veganism. And it said that people who had blood type A were more suited to vegetarianism. Do you think that can be simplified down to that easy?
Years ago, I'm A group, and when I was training to be a homeopath, we had a great lecture, from a vet, actually, who did homeopathy for animals and people. And I asked him about this because I said, you know, I have weeks when I really want to eat vegetables, just loads of vegetables, and then I can't eat enough meat. I said, but I'm being really bad to the planet and bad to this, that, and the other. And I'm an A, so I'm supposed to be a vegetarian. And he looked at me. He said, do you know what blood groups your parents were? Do you know what blood groups your grandparents were? He said, you're not just,
grandparents
you are. Yeah. And going back to what I said earlier about, I mean, it's interesting how the blood groups have evolved. But going back to what I said earlier, there is no indigenous group of people in this world who are naturally vegetarian. Therefore, I don't hold with it. I don't hold with it on those grounds.
Yeah, I did have that same sense, actually. And yeah, that's a great point. You know, you're not just because you happen to be O positive or A whatever. You're still an amalgamation of your distant and recent ancestors. So yeah, that's a great point. Going back to the mothers and trying to eat optimally for the birth and your offspring. What do you think of the maternity services advice? Do you know much about what midwives are telling new mums? Does it need to wait? Well, I guess it does need to start way sooner than the minute you go for your booking appointment.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we'll be eating right before we conceive. And oh God, do you really want me to get started and try not to go rant, stand.
Try not to rant, but yes.
It's misogynistic, it's infantilizing, it's just, oh, you're a woman, now you're pregnant, and therefore you can't possibly think sensibly for yourself and can't be trusted. So again, most of the guidelines are complete and utter balderdash. There's just, I'm being polite. God, I'm using old-fashioned words here as well. They're rubbish. You know, I realised that during my pregnancies, I ate loads of raw eggs because I used to make my own mayonnaise and my own chocolate mousse.
Terrible heathen mother.
I know. All I made was raw eggs. I never thought about it. I really didn't. It's what I've always done. I fed my daughter liver, and I will feed any other daughter's liver because in some countries it's a sacred
child
food.
services.
You can. But you know what? The only way you can OD on natural vitamin A is to eat a whole polar bear liver. Now, A, have you ever seen the size of a polar bear liver? It's huge. Even I couldn't eat it in a week. And B, they are extraordinarily high in vitamin A, natural vitamin A. So women are told basically to starve themselves. They're told to eat complete SH1T. I think you should know where your food is coming from. I know that your babies need you to be eating animal fats because they need it for the myelin sheathing. They need it for the nervous system. We need it for our hormonal balance. If we don't have enough fat in our diet, our hormones are out of balance. The body's always, it's such a clever thing, the body, that our brains are really mad. But it's always trying to balance itself. And I know a lot of people will get cross with what I'm saying, but my experience over the years, research and so on and so forth, women should be eating lots of lovely fatty meats. You don't have to buy expensive meat. Buy your locally produced meat. Eat nose to tail. I won't say raw milk because you need to know where it's coming from and your body needs to be used to it. The research that alcohol is going to kill you or your baby, again, it's very moralistic. The odd glass, if you're okay with alcohol, the odd glass of wine here or there, and now I'm going to be written off and demonized forever. Women,
well, you have my support. I had a beer or two in pregnancy.
It used to be if you were anemic, you were told to drink Guinness. The pregnancy multivitamins, half of them are synthetic. Vitamin A in its best form is always going to be from an animal source, so eat eggs. Eat butter from grass-fed cows. That contains vitamin A and vitamin K. And you need your fats to be able to uptake your fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. And your gut's happier and your brain settles down and your baby's getting what it needs. And you're less likely to then binge on the carbohydrates, which get converted to sugar, which increase your risk of gestational diabetes. So do I sound passionate? I am.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I mean, it was a little bit leading perhaps, but you know, this podcast is about, you know, alternative methods, and the mainstream aren't necessarily getting it right or even trying very hard. It seems quite rudimentary what they tell you. You know, just avoid caffeine, avoid deep sea fish like marlin and shark, avoid
So,
too much vitamin A.
but what happens if you live in a part of the world where that's a natural part of your diet? Do you stop eating your
Exactly.
natural diet?
It's not good. Yeah, either you stop eating throughout your pregnancy, or you know, there shouldn't be any healthy pregnancies going to term then, if that's the case.
Yeah, but guess
But
what?
there obviously are.
There are.
Yeah, there are.
You know, if you're going to eat wheat, then try and ferment it so you're doing your sourdoughs. If you're a bit sensitive to dairy, ferment it, because humans apparently were fermenting animal milks long before we started to drink them straight from the animal. And again, there are groups of peoples who are more adapted to animal milks. And I'm sure it's an evolutionary thing of the further we moved out of Africa to different climates and different, you know, I've got white skin because I'm in a country that doesn't have much daylight. It makes sense that my skin is paler in order that I can use and make the most of the daylight whilst it's there, because we ain't got daylight now. And so if I haven't stored up enough, and you get D in your animal fats and in your animal milks. So do you see?
Okay, so can you talk a bit about like what specifically do you get from animal fats that you can't get from other fats, if you haven't already answered that?
You'll get fat soluble vitamins. They are more stable than your corn oil, your sesame seed oil, your maize oil, your sunflower oil. And in fact, here's one.
Okay.
Sunflower oil used to be used when they first started doing kidney transplants. It was used to suppress the immune system, because it was known to help suppress the immune system so that the body wouldn't immediately kick out the kidney. And sunflower oil is used in laboratories to induce tumours in rats.
Wow. Okay. And is there a difference between if it's like raw or heated, or it doesn't change it?
If you do a cold pressed sunflower oil or a nut oil or any other seed oil, they are really bitter and really strong.
Okay.
But you need to cold press and use. Yeah, and you need to cold press and use really quickly, because they oxidize very quickly. So then you've got a rancid fat that's not particularly good for you.
Okay. And what about, could you tell us a bit more about this gap? So it's gut and psychology, or gut and physiology syndrome, is it? Or
yeah.
Syndrome, yeah. Yeah, tell us a bit about that. The first time I was introduced was when I saw it on your website. So
okay, thank you. I came to it because a member of my family had a lot of symptoms that we couldn't work out, and so it was suggested that we follow this, and it helped massively. So the idea behind it is that because of the environment that we live in, the foods that we eat, the allopathic drugs, medicines that we've taken, they can all damage our gut. So behind GAPS is the idea of following a protocol that helps to heal and seal the gut. And once that's started to happen, then the body can start to heal itself, because in effect, you've taken out things that could be causing those problems in the first place. You're giving the body a time to have a breather and to be able to heal. And I mentioned Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride earlier. She put the protocol together, and she used to be a neurosurgeon, a pediatric neurosurgeon in Russia. So lots of the Eastern European traditional foods are, or some of them are used as well. So the idea, like, you would ferment, we use kefir, we make our own kefir. You can use that to ferment other vegetables, things like beetroot, to make a fermented drink, which is actually quite nice. And so we ferment lots of vegetables, and you can use the fermentation process to prolong the life of, say, fish. I've certainly fermented I've bought fish on its use by date in the supermarket, and 3 months later we've been eating it, and it's full of good probiotic bacteria that help your gut and make you feel ultimately really good. And so that there's so many different conditions that GAPS can be used for, but initially it came about because it's part of protocols to help children who are autistic or young adults who are autistic, but it was found to help lots of autoimmune conditions.
Brilliant. I'm so like, I want to just go out there and eat pure now. It's very inspiring to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do just get a bit lazy, and just convenience is the key. But yeah, I think we probably suffer for it in terms of our energy levels and our health and our psychological well-being.
We even find like lots of skin conditions clear up once you get somebody onto a GAPS way of eating, or you get them onto a more animal-based way of eating, and their skin conditions clear, because if the gut's unhappy, it will send out to the skin, because the skin is an organ of elimination, and so any toxicity ends up coming out on your skin. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. That's been so fascinating. And yeah, like I say, I'm going to try to implement some of these things. I think the removal vegetable oils will be my toughest one of the three.
It is a tough one, because they're omnipresent. They're in so many processed foods. And having a takeaway. And another client who's healed so many of his conditions was in a situation recently where he either starved for 48 hours because he got caught up in plane delays and strikes. And he said he'd gone off and he'd had chips were about the only thing that were available, and something else. So he'd had wheat, he'd had vegetable oils. And he said, the great thing is my guts have obviously healed because there were no issues. He said, but my brain, oh my God, the brain fog. He said, I could really feel between my mouth tasting horrible and the brain fog.
Wow, yeah. So it's sort of instant giving your body signals of like, no, I'm not enjoying this. This isn't good for us.
But it's taken him a few days for that to all clear out, to get back to feeling okay again. So yeah,
I think there's any much benefit in the like water fasts that people are doing these days, like long days and days without any food.
I think for some people there absolutely is. I'm not convinced. I think whilst we're going through our menstrual cycles, we shouldn't really be doing that, because it can really, really, really mess up our cycles. Having said that, if you're seriously ill, I'm not qualified. I personally wouldn't guide a water fast. I'm not experienced or trained enough. I would send you to somebody who is. Absolutely do it under the guidance of somebody who is fully trained and knows what they're doing. That's crucial. Yeah. Not to be done whilst pregnant.
No, God, as if you could. I could
go
more than
you know what they say, after pregnancy, eat your placenta. Just allow yourself.
Of course, yeah, we haven't even touched on that. Yeah, I was just more interested in the things I hadn't heard of, which I'm a qualified placenta encapsulator myself, so I don't care about that. But I'm sure our listeners would. So, if you want to talk about that, please do. Yeah.
Well, so it brings in a new. Well, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this as well. That women book us because maybe they've either heard about how brilliant it is, so they'll have their placentas encapsulated. So we dehydrate, grind, and put into capsules. And it's a superfood. I've come back to nutrition. It's a superfood. You're having something that's totally bioavailable. So your body can use the vitamins A, D, E, all the B groups. There's 17 different hormones that help to stop you getting stressed, help to stop you not healing. They help you to heal. Let's be positive about that. You've got the heme iron, and the body loves heme iron. It can fully use that. So I love it when you get vegan women, vegetarian women who eat anything, have their placentas encapsulated. And the smoothies, you've got live stem cells in your smoothie.
Amazing.
So you can imagine that. So it
hasn't been as popular, the smoothies, I think, because it's just a bit too close to home for people with the capsules, it's a lot more, you know, it looks more sterilized and sedate when they
It
receive them.
is. And my daughter wouldn't have a smoothie with her first, and then by the time she had her second, I'd made them for several of her friends, and they'd raved about them. And it turned out that she thought, she teaches me, I'm still learning, she teaches me so much, that she thought it was just liquidized placenta. I went, no, oh my god, no.
No, we're not animals. We're not savages. We stick some frozen banana in there.
I know. So the first one I made for her, and I said, is it okay? And she just handed it back to me, and went, more banana, in front of a room full of midnights. And I'm going, so I went back to her kitchen and added more. In fact, I've noticed if I'm going to use bananas, I need to get them ripe and freeze them.
Yeah,
but I
be
know,
ready at hand.
you know, I know, but women say that they have less hair loss, they don't have postnatal depression, their energy levels. Family members comment when they forget to take their capsules for a few days on the differences in them.
Really?
Some women find it really boosts their milk supply. A couple of autoimmune conditions that have just leveled off. And I just find that also fascinating that women get this fabulous healing from their placenta. But is it any wonder?
Yeah, of course. What would you say to naysayers or the criticism that it's a way to remove waste? So, you know, people say that wouldn't the placenta and the cord be full of waste as
but
well?
It's not. It's where people it's like butchers say the same to me about the liver. Oh, it stores waste. No, it doesn't. It's a filtration system. The placenta is a filtration system. It's not going to store waste because it would make it ill. It would not function properly. All waste gets back into the intestines to go out in feces, because the vast majority of our feces should be dead cells and natural body waste, or we sweat it out, or we might pee it out. But it's not. It doesn't store. I know that things. So if you've been smoking, cadmium. In fact, if you smoke, cadmium is stored around the uterus, whether or not you're having babies. So cadmium will also be found in your placenta. But lots of toxic chemicals are in our foods anyway. Like, you know, if they're grown by the wayside, certain rices have much higher levels of arsenic than others. So no, it doesn't. It does not store.
No,
toxicity.
it's filtering it out.
It's a filtration
actually,
system.
So,
yeah,
it won't have it. It doesn't remain in there indefinitely.
No.
Yeah.
No,
just
passes
through.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for today. I'm going off to have a mango smoothie because that's allowed, right? That's good. That's good for me.
chucking some coconut oil just to boost that level.
Fine.
And enjoy. Fresh mango. Yum.
I know, right? Lucky me. All right. Take care. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Caroline.
Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye.